Luther's hooves crunched over the dirt road like old bones snapping in dry grass. The wind was heavy tonight, warm with a kind of dampness that shouldn't have been possible in the high desert. A scent of rust, sweet rot, and burnt sugar. Elijah tugged his coat tighter around his ribs as they crested the ridge. The town of Calamore glimmered faintly ahead, half asleep beneath a curtain of flickering lantern light and wood smoke. He hadn't been back here in months, not since New Galilee burned behind his footsteps and screams chased him through smoke that no one would call holy. But before he saw the town, he saw it. Off to the east, nestled in a basin where the hills sank low, a carnival blazed like a wound in the dark. A field of striped tents and crooked scaffolds glowed with color too loud for the hour, red and gold and sickly teal, spinning in pulses like the heartbeat of a fever dream. The sound drifted on the wind, music without tune, laughter without rhythm, and the occasional echo of something metallic slapping against something wet. Elijah slowed Luther to a halt. The stallion snorted, uneasy. He pawed at the dirt, and Elijah could feel his tensions through the reins. His ring was warm against his skin, a dull warmth at first, like stone left too long in the sun. But as he sat watching the carnival twist in the dark, the heat deepened. A slow burn. Not pain, not yet, but promise. Yeah, he muttered to no one, voice like a gravel in prayer. I see it too. He nudged Luther forward. They passed within a few hundred yards of the carnival, close enough to hear the barkers shout in their slurred, honey-slick voices. Step right up and trade your frowns for fortunes. Win a prize, win a dream, win a life worth living. Each word made the ring flare hotter. Children's voices giggled and sang, high and bright. But Elijah had been in too many towns, too many cursed grounds, to believe that sound without suspicion. Elijah kept riding. By the time he reached the stables at the edge of Calamore, the carnival sounds had faded, but the heat on his finger remained. He said nothing, just dismounted, patted Luther's neck once, and led him into the stall without fuss. The stable hand, a boy with sunburned cheeks and one eye milky with blindness, offered no greeting, just took the reins with shaking fingers and scurried off into the dark. The gilded mare stood exactly as he remembered it. No sign had been repainted, no curtains replaced. The warped wood door still stuck halfway unless you kicked it, and the same cracked oil lamp flickered above the threshold. Inside, the air was warm with lamp heat and spirits, but quiet for a Friday night. A few patrons nursed their drinks in silence. One snored in the corner. Another one stared too long at nothing. Elijah crossed the floor with slow, heavy boots and stopped at the counter. The barkeep looked up. A different man than last time. Thin, with the look of someone who used to be broad, now shrinking into himself. His eyes flitted to Elijah's badge, still pinned upside down on his coat, and then to the revolver on his hip. What you drinking, stranger? Elijah tapped one finger on the countertop. Jennifer. The barkeep blinked, then nodded towards the stairs. Same room as last time. She'll come. Elijah said nothing, just turned and climbed. The room was small and smelled of dust, soap, and memory. One candle waited beside the bed, already lit. The flame fluttered faintly as he shut the door behind him. He removed his coat with slow, methodical movements and laid it across the footboard, sat on the edge of the bed, stared at the ring on his hand like it might speak. It didn't, but it was still warm, a whisper in its own way. The knock was soft and familiar. Come on in, Elijah said. The door creaked open and Jennifer stepped inside. She was dressed simple tonight, Rough linen blouse, black skirt, dark shawl wrapped loose around her shoulders. Her hair was different than he remembered. Shorter, darker at the roots. A streak of silver ran near one ear. But her eyes, those were the same. Still sharp, still sad. She shut the door behind her without asking.
Elijah.
He nodded once. Jennifer? She crossed the room slow, not sure if she should sit. He answered the unasked question with a look. She sat beside him on the bed. Silence held between them, long enough for the candle to crackle. Then she looked at him.
So, what brings you back?
He didn't answer right away, just ran a hand over his jaw, rough with travel and old scabs. There's a carnival, he said finally. Saw it riding in. She stiffened, just enough for someone trained to see it.
Yeah. That showed up a few weeks after you left. Didn't think much of it at first. Just tents and paint and noise. But...
She trailed off. But what? She turned to look at him fully now.
You felt it, didn't you?
He held up his hand. The ring shimmered faintly. Yeah, I felt it. Jennifer looked down at her hands. They were clenched in her lap.
They came in quiet. No fanfare. No wagons or trains. Just one morning, they were there, setting up in the old farmland. Folks started going out in droves, said it was the most fun they'd had since the judgment.
Elijah stared. Fun?
Games, rides, prizes, shows that make you feel like you're dreaming.
She swallowed.
People said it was healing.
He said nothing. The ring pulsed once.
I went.
He turned to her, sharp.
I didn't know.
She said quickly.
Back then, it just looked like something harmless. Tents and music, kids running around with prizes.
He didn't say anything, but his eyes stayed on her like a blade still sheathed. Quiet, but not safe. Jennifer looked away.
I didn't feel right after. Just off. Took me a while to realize it. Like I'd been somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, but couldn't remember what I did wrong.
She crossed the room slowly and rested her hand on the window ledge.
It's not everyone, not all at once, but people have been different. Forgetful mostly. Quick to laugh at nothing, slower to anger too, which sounds good until you see a man smile through a broken nose and not even realize he's bleeding.
Elijah's jaw tightened. Any disappearances?
Not disappearances, just absences. Like someone who used to sit on the corner every morning suddenly isn't there, and no one thinks to ask why. You ever get the feeling a room used to be full, but now there's too much air in it?
He gave a short nod. Jennifer turned back to him.
I hear things. Guests mumbling in their sleep. One woman woke up screaming because she swore her husband was standing over her with a red balloon and no eyes. The man was still in bed. Didn't even twitch.
Elijah crossed to the small wash basin, poured a splash of water over his blistered hand. The ring hissed faintly in response. Jennifer leaned against the wall, arms folded.
So what now?
I'll walk the grounds tomorrow. See the shape of the thing.
I'll go with you.
He didn't even look up. No.
Elijah,
No.
I know that place. I've been inside. I might see something you won't.
He turned now. You might see more than you want.
I don't care.
You should. Jennifer's voice dropped.
I'm not afraid of the dark anymore. I'm afraid of pretending there's nothing in it.
That stopped him just for a breath. She stepped closer.
You came back. That means something. And whether you want to say it or not, I matter to you. Don't insult both of us by pretending I don't.
Elijah's eyes flicked away. He dragged a hand across his mouth, slow and tired. He looked at her again. Really looked. And for the first time since he'd come back through those town gates, something in his face cracked just a little. Not softness, not surrender. Just the hint of a man who remembered how it felt to be seen. "All right," he said. Jennifer exhaled. Not a smile, not quite, but close.
I'll be ready by dawn.
Elijah didn't nod. He just stood there, listening to the candle's slow hiss, the wind tapping against the window glass, and the echo of music still bleeding faintly through the hills. The carnival was waiting, and now so were they. Morning hit the town in pale streaks, light bleeding through a rust-colored sky. Elijah and Jennifer spent the night entwined under the sheets, his hands caressing her curves while her hands traced the scars of his battle-worn life. Normally, Elijah would brush someone's hands away with annoyance, but not Jennifer. Her touch meant something else. Elijah stood outside the gilded mare beside Jennifer, his coat already dusted with the dry grit kicked up by the passing wind. Ahead, the carnival stirred. Even in daylight, it didn't lose its dreamlike sheen. The tents were too tall, edges too sharp, colors too bold. The reds glared like fresh blood, and the blues had the shine of old bruises. Striped canopies curved overhead in impossible arcs, fluttering without breeze. At the entrance stood two columns wrapped in faded ribbons and bones small enough to be mistaken for birds. They stepped through the arch. Music drifted from somewhere, not loud but constant. A wheezing calliope tune, off-key, notes bending downward at the end like they were trying to fall into silence but kept getting pulled back. Elijah scanned the grounds with narrowed eyes. The tents weren't scattered randomly, the way most traveling carnivals operated. No, these were deliberate, laid out in a crescent, half a circle around a wide dirt lot. 3 main tents at the curve's edge formed a triangle, too symmetrical, too clean. He looked down at his hand. The ring had been quiet, but it was warmer than it had been that morning. A voice to their left called out,
Well now, you two look like you've never been to a proper show before.
A woman stood beside a crimson-draped wagon. Her body was a canvas of ink. Tattoos spilled across every visible inch of skin like living scripture. Eyes rimmed in coal black, lips stained the same. She offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes.
Elijah and guest, welcome to Lacey's Truce. First reading's free, no charge for the damned.
He stared at her. How do you know my name?
Oh, honey, names hang off you like smoke. Just takes the right eyes to see. I hear the name John hanging off of you as well.
Elijah twitched slightly at that. He hadn't heard that name in quite some time. Jennifer stepped slightly closer to him.
What do you read exactly?
Miss Lacey tilted her head.
Futures, secrets, veins of fate pulsing just beneath the surface. Want me to tell you how you die?
No, Elijah said flatly. The tattooed woman shrugged.
Suit yourself, but you'll wish you asked before long.
She turned her gaze to Jennifer.
You should come back tonight, sweetheart. Things show up clearer in the dark.
They walked on. The next tent smelled of grease and meat. Smoke drifted from a metal cart shaped like a pig's head. nostrils glowing red from coal heat. Behind it stood a cook, shirtless, his apron stained and too tight around a belly that shifted as if something underneath was trying to move on its own. Grinner. The name was carved into the wood plank above him, uneven, gouged deep, still slick at the edges. "Care for a taste?" the man rumbled, voice like tar rolling downstairs. "Special of the day, smile sausage, fresh as this morning." Elijah didn't move. "What's in it?" Grinner's face cracked into a wide grin, rows of teeth far too sharp for a man, stretching back too deep in his jaw. "Whatever's around to eat, my friend. You know how life is out here. I've been doing this for decades and can turn just about anything into a delectable treat." Jennifer touched Elijah's sleeve. They kept walking. At the far end of the grounds, near the boundary where the grass gave way to dust again, stood a large open space. A few scattered weights, a makeshift platform. Sitting on a wooden crate was a man built like a statue, still, massive, and silent. Solomon Riggs. His skin was gray-brown, cracked like bark, with eyes so deep-set they looked carved. He didn't look at them, didn't acknowledge their presence at all. Elijah watched him for a long moment. The man didn't blink. Solomon Riggs stood center ring on a bare patch of packed earth, framed by a low arc of wooden bleachers. No spotlight, just sun. No music, just breath. He lifted a rusted wagon axle above his head, not in a jerk or swing, but in a slow, grinding rise, arms locked straight, knees unmoving. Dust flared at his feet from the strain, or maybe just the stillness of it. The crowd didn't cheer. They watched. The axle clanged to the ground a moment later, hard enough to rattle teeth. Riggs stepped back, took a thick chain coiled beside a stump, and looped it once around his neck. He grabbed either end in his fists, squared his stance, and began to pull. The metal groaned. Elijah stood near the back, hat low, coat drawn tight despite the heat. The ring of flame pulsed on his hand once. No heat, just a dry sting under the skin. It didn't shout, it didn't scream, it warmed. He turned it slightly toward the man standing beside him, gaunt, sun-scorched, shirt open, eyes locked on the stage. "You ever see someone crack a horseshoe in half with their teeth?" "No, I haven't." "I have. Yesterday, right here." Riggs gave a sudden yank. The chain snapped. The crowd gasped. The man beside Elijah crossed himself. The strong man gave a slight bow, nothing theatrical, and walked off into the shade behind the bleachers, chain end dragging behind him like leashes gone slack. They came upon the game just as a man stepped up to try it. Sleeves rolled, coin already in hand. A wooden booth carved to resemble an old train engine, chipped and leaning with iron levers sticking up from the back like rusted ribs. Painted across the top in chipped red script, "One pull for good luck." No barker, just the silent woman in red laced behind the counter. She handed over a brass token without a word. The man inserted it, pulled the lever. The contraption rattled. Bells clanged, badly tuned. A puff of red dust shot into the air, and from a side drawer, the woman produced a stuffed rabbit, long-eared, patched with rough stitching, one black eye missing. She handed it to the girl. That's when the ring of flame flared. Quick and hot, no warning, no doubt. Elijah kept his hands at his sides, but the pain bit clean to the bone. The girl held the rabbit tight. Her expression didn't change. She didn't smile, just stared at it, like it had said something only she could hear. The father ruffled her hair and thanked the attendant. She said nothing. They walked off. The rabbit's stitched mouth hung crooked, like it had once been wider. Jennifer leaned in low.
You felt it too.
Elijah nodded once. They didn't speak until they were clear of the tents. Jennifer walked half a step behind him, eyes on the dust curling around her boots. Elijah's hand flexed at his side, fingers twitching like they were trying to rid themselves of heat. The ring of flame still pulsed, soft now but insistent. The wind shifted. The town came back into view, distant but close enough to smell smoke and horses. Elijah didn't stop walking until the cracked wooden sign creaked overhead.
I saw that girl.
Jennifer finally said, voice low.
Day before yesterday. She was with her mama, crying because she wanted to leave. Today, she didn't even blink.
Elijah kept walking.
You think it's the toy?
No. It's the prize. Jennifer frowned.
Difference being?
He didn't answer. The difference wasn't something he could put into words. It was the shape of things. How the prize didn't feel like a gift. It felt like a claim. They visited their first house that afternoon. The house of someone that Jennifer knew had been to the carnival. They had been different when they came back. The house was small and leaning. Paint flaked off like burnt skin. A porch swing creaked lazily with no one on it. Inside it smelled of blood and vinegar. The door hadn't been locked. Elijah pushed it open with the toe of his boot. A man sat in a chair in the main room, dead long enough for the flies to forget he'd once moved. His hands were outstretched, fingers clawing toward the door, as if he'd changed his mind about dying halfway through. What stopped Elijah cold wasn't the blood. It was what the man clutched. A toy lion, stuffed, crudely sewn, its mane patchy and threadbare. Its eyes were like little buttons of black glass. Its mouth was stitched in a crooked grin. Jennifer stepped over the threshold, covering her nose.
That's Jonas Walker. Drank himself stupid most nights. Loud as hell. Always playing cards outside the mare.
Elijah said nothing. She glanced at the lion.
I've never seen that before.
He reached forward and touched the lion. The ring hissed like a brand against skin. He didn't pull away. He waited until the heat faded, then stood again. Let's find another. The second house was worse. No one answered when they knocked. Elijah pried the door open with a saw blade. The place was too quiet. Dust in the air, but not a mote stirred. The furniture was neat. Plates still set on the table, but no people.
Locked from the inside, no forced entry, no broken glass.
In the front room sat a doll. It started from the windowsill, crooked against the glass like it had been set there by a child who forgot it. One of its eyes was missing, a red ribbon curled around its neck. Its mouth had no stitching, just a slit, like it could whisper if it wanted to. The ring flared, hot enough that Elijah hissed under his breath. He grit his teeth and took a step back. Jennifer didn't miss it.
You think they left?
I think something took him. Jennifer looked at the doll again, and this time took a step away from it. That night, back in the Gilded Mare, they didn't sleep. The common room was empty, save for a henchwoman Elijah didn't recognize, and a barkeep polishing from a glass he'd probably never served from. They sat at a side table. Elijah poured water. Jennifer didn't touch hers.
I asked around. Folks are days blurry. Said it's from the heat or bad rain.
He raised an eyebrow.
But it ain't just that. There's a boy. Want a whistle? He ain't stopped humming it since. Even when he sleeps.
Elijah nodded once. The ring fell beneath him. Jennifer leaned forward.
You still think it's the three you met?
I do. But they ain't the ones making the movies. She sat down.
Then what are they?
He looked past her and replied. Signs. Signs. Upstairs, the room smelled of hot metal and dried sage. Elijah sat at the edge of the bed. The Saint Breaker laid out across a cloth beside the scorched Bible. Jennifer sat on the floor by the window, one leg over beneath her, mending a tear in his coat with a needle too small for his job. The lantern on the table flickered weakly, casting them both. Neither had said much before they returned. The air was thick with unsaid things. Then the Bible shifted. Its clasp clicked open on a side. Pages rustled like leaves caught in a low, deliberate. Elijah didn't move. He just watched as the book opened itself, slow and certain, then stopped. Jennifer paused her stitching.
That ever happened before?
Elijah muttered, eyes narrowing. The page it had landed on wasn't familiar. The paper looked older, as if scorched and soaked in dried ink. The ink didn't look like it. It had shimmered faintly, like it had been burned in. The verse read, "They wear joy like a mask, and carry prizes filled with famine. Their feast is not a feast, but a forgiveness. 3 the maw, the rest, the gaze." Jennifer stood, crossed the room, and leaned over his shoulder to read. The glow from the page lit her face in soft orange.
The maw, the grasp, the gaze. Sounds like our 3 friends.
Simple but charming. 3 beasts enclosed in a ring of ash. One with a mouth gaping sweet and its spitting out. One with hands like fingers, fingers too long. One with a single, oversized eye. Fixed directly.
Some kind of pact?
Maybe. Maybe a gift. She crossed her arms.
You ever see signs like this before?
And I don't like how it's come. Jennifer turned away, chewing the inside of the cheek.
So what do we do?
Elijah flipped open his notebook. Pages filled with maps and hand-finished sketches. Notes in shorthand only he could read. He stopped on a clean page, then wrote 3 names and circled each one. Names. Solomon Williams. Jennifer sat back down, this time beside the bed.
You think they're demons?
I'll know more once I find them. She nodded, then quietly.
And you think they're feeding on us?
He looked at her, tired, steady. They already are. The ring on his hand warmed again, slowly rising like an ember stirring under skin. Jennifer didn't speak for a while. Neither did Elijah. The lantern burned low. Outside, the wind pulled at the walls of the gilded manor, whispering through the warped wood like it had secrets to tell. Elijah sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, head bowed over the notebook. Jennifer had moved back to the window. She didn't speak then, just watched the dust swirl in the light and the slow twitch in his jaw. After a long stretch of silence, she said,
You always write names down like that.
Elijah didn't look at him. Sometimes.
When you're sure they're guilty?
He hesitated. When I'm sure they're involved. She turned toward him, her voice gentle, not out of pity. She didn't pity him, but out of recognition. A soft mirror held up to something she'd seen before.
You've done this a lot, haven't you?
He didn't answer.
I can see it in the way you move.
Still, in the mirror, against the wall, arms crossed. She stared at the coat Elijah was holding on the back of the chair, the one she'd stitched just hours ago.
First time, something out of fear. Middle of the night, he sat up, skin all gray, eyes white like boiled glass, and whispered my name like he'd never stopped breathing. He told me I was next, and then he fell dead again.
Elijah finally looked up.
I didn't sleep for 3 nights. Didn't tell anyone either. Figured if I said it out loud, it might come back.
He nodded once. Quiet understanding. Then she added,
You ever see something like that?
Elijah exhaled through his nose. Worse. She waited. He rubbed a hand over his face, slow and worn. Then finally, I was 5. Jennifer's posture shifted. She stayed still. He didn't rush it, he just gave him space. My town is called Stonebridge. A small place up near where it used to be in Colorado before. Not my father kept the bell. His voice was steady, but it had a weight now. Like every word, it cost something to pull from his chest. One night they came. Ghouls. Not this one. These were cold. This man wore no skin carved in languages I didn't know. He spoke a language tore through the town like it was paper. He paused. Hissed. He fled to the basement of the chapel. They killed my parents first. Mother left me there. I stayed silent. Stayed there 2 nights, wrapped in a quilt, drinking mildew water off stove, listening. Jennifer didn't interrupt. The 3rd day, someone came. He leaned back, eyes distant. Not him. John. That was his name. Just John. He came alone. Long coat, revolver like thunder, stars down his chest. Didn't ask questions. Just end it. Cleanse the town like you've been told to. A long silence followed. They found me curled up with a Bible. The only one in the town. Didn't even know how to read, Jennifer sat down at the edge of the bed. Not touching it, just close. I think he was gonna leave. Too broken. But something told him otherwise. She saw Elijah nodded. That's what he said. This one is mine. That's
And he raised you?
trained high up in the mountains, miles from the next soul. He taught me to shoot before I taught me to listen. Not for people, never for people. For signs, for wrongness. For when the air grows still and the trees forget how to move. Jennifer tilted her head.
You ever wish he hadn't?
Elijah looked at her, eyes like stone but tired. That day, another silence stroked. This one wasn't heavy, just honest. She reached out, placed her hand on his.
You've never told anyone that before, have you?
He shook his head. I don't see the point.
You don't think it matters?
It sure as hell don't change nothing. She studied his face for a long time.
It changes this. You.
Elijah looked down at her hands. Danger.
When has life after the Sundering ever been about safety? All anyone has known for generations now is pain, is suffering. I'm not even sure if your God exists. And if he does, so far I'm convinced he's a me.
He looked at her. He really looked. And for the first time in a long while, Elijah Mandarin had nothing to say. They sat like that until the lantern burned down. The room was dark. The air heavy with sleep and lantern smoke. Jennifer's breath had slowed, long and even. Elijah waited until it held the rhythm of real rest. Not pretending. Not hovering near wakefulness. Just sleep. The kind you get when your guard's down, when you trust who's nearby. He slid his hand from her sleeve, careful not to stir her. Rose from the bed without a sound. He strapped on the chain of Golgotha, slid the psalm blade into its sheath. Saintbreaker sat like judgment at his side. The ring of flame hung low against his skin. Not searing, but awake, alert. He looked at her one last time before slipping out. She'd curled toward where he'd been, still wrapped in half-sleep in the quiet plus they came to. The carnival was asleep in pieces. Some tents were still lit, flickering red, canvas pulsing like old lungs. Others had gone dead. Music had long since died, but the air had Elijah moved without drawing notice. The grounds had quieted, but they hadn't emptied. Somewhere behind the curtain, someone whispered a joke. Laughter followed. Too long, too sharp, then silence. He found the trail not by tracks, but by signs. Bones too clean near the fireplace. Scratch marks in the bark of a tree just outside the grounds. And flies swarming a tent that stank of wet copper and honey. He waited, watched. Midnight came, and he walked through. They walked without hurry. Miss Lacey still wearing her long shawl, tattoos shifting faintly beneath her skin as if dreaming. Grinner trailed behind, his limp more pronounced now, one leg dragging oddly. Solomon was shirtless, his back a map of scars and muscle, and his eyes distant like he was listening to something no one else could hear. They disappeared behind a striped black and gold curtain at the edge of the carnival. Elijah waited 5 minutes. Then the tent was sealed, but the side slouched slightly, age rope straining. He cut a slit near the back with the saw blade, slow and silent, and slid inside. Inside was a different world. The center was a crude table of old wood, notched and bloodstained. Around it, bone stools, skin lanterns, silverware made from jawbones. The walls were draped in something that wasn't quite fabric, a stretched hide etched with runes. On the table, raw meat glistening in the light of a suspended candle, wine so dark it looked black, and a pile of old bones scraped clean. Some human, some not. Grinner was already eating. No utensils. His jaw yawned wider than it should, teeth too many for one mouth. He clenched it to a thigh with casual manner, like chewing on brittle wood. Miss Lacey sipped from a silver goblet, her lips stained. Her tattoos rippled, spreading like oil in her glass. Faces, eyes, sliver up her throat and blinked at Solomon. Solomon sat quietly, drinking nothing, eyes shut. Elijah didn't announce himself. His neck was something finally glanced. The bullet ripping Grinner's shoulder caused in a burst of black ichor and splintered bone. The wound exploded into movement. Voice shattering into pools. His jaw dislocated, splitting down the middle, the snake shedding its skin. 2 tongues lurched out. Miss Lacey dropped her helmet. Her tattoo surged, crawling over her face, hands. She screamed, and the sound warped the air. Solomon rose slowly, like the ground. His spine cracked as it stretched. His skin bulged, fur tearing through. Muscles thickened grotesquely. Fingers became claws. His mouth opened and he howled. Elijah didn't flinch. He drew the saw blade, spinning it once before catching Lacey's strike. Her arm was a spear now, ink and bone. He ducked, cut her across the ribs, and her tattoos hissed, recoiling. Grinner lunged from the side. Elijah rolled, but teeth caught his throat, tore it, bit flesh. He drove the knife into Grinner's neck and twisted hard. Smoke poured from the wound. Solomon charged. Elijah barely had time to throw the chain. It wrapped once around the beast's arm, and Solomon roared. The chain sizzled against his skin, burning through glamour and through falsehood. What was left underneath was worse. A beast with no conscience, all muscle, hunger, and rage. Elijah yanked the chain and pulled Solomon off balance, used the moment to hurl Grinner into the side of the tent. The cook's head struck the post with a wet crunch. Lacey came again, this time with wings of ink, her feet floating off the ground, tattoos screaming. Elijah muttered something in the old tongue. The saw blade lit cold, and he slashed up, catching her across the gut. She shrieked. Then Solomon was armed, fists like sledgehammers. One caught Elijah in the ribs. Something cracked. He hit the ground hard and rolled. The breath had gone from him. Solomon moved in, claws ready. Elijah grabbed the fingerbone of St. Martin and pushed it hard. The beast hesitated. Elijah rose, coughing blood. He moved, bladed to Solomon's thigh, deep in the beast screamed. Grinner staggered up, jaw bent sideways, eyes full of hatred. Elijah caught him with the chain next, wrapped it around his neck, and whispered scripture into his ear. Grinner's skin peeled. The gun dropped. It was left to the nail, but the husk of Elijah drove the saw tattoos wriggled like worms under her skin, peeling loose, torn clawed wings, serpents, and writhing wounds. They moved too fast to track, flickering over her like shadows hidden beneath the lantern. She grinned hard, her mouth filled with jagged teeth. Hadn't been there a second ago. Elijah didn't flinch. He rolled sideways over the gore-sick floor, grabbed Saint Breaker where it had fallen near Gunner's carcass. His fingers moved to the stick, broke open the chamber, slit a single round hole and snapped it shut. The sound echoed the screaming a word Elijah didn't know. One not meant for mortal tongues. Elijah fired. One shot. A bullet caught her center mass. The scream cut off middle. Her body jerked. And for a breathless moment, the tattoos seemed to come alive in protest, squirming off her skin, unraveling like threads in a burning cloth. Then she dropped, hard, twisted on the floor like a broken marionette. Ink pooled around her. Elijah didn't bother to watch her die. He turned to Solomon, still breathing barely. The beast twitched, limbs spasming, eyes unfocused. Elijah walked over slowly, blood dripping from his lip. He raised his saber, and he pulled the trigger again. Empty. He holstered the gun, drew the saw blade, and knelt. And with one clean stroke, he ended it. And unbeknownst to him, the ringmaster watched. From the ridgeline beyond the trees, a tall figure stood perfectly still, silhouetted against the low moon, a silver outline at the edge of fire and fire. His name was Jubilee. He did not breathe heavy from the climb. He did not blink as Elijah slaughtered the last of his troop. He merely smiled. The kind of smile men give out for execution. The kind that says yes. The men stitched suddenly with red thread. His own once again survived and returned, descending the hill with the easy grace of a man who has been truly stumbled. Back in town, the gilded man was quiet. Most of the regulars had gone to bed. The barkeep was wiping down glass that didn't need wiping with ill-equipped linen. Jubilee stepped in like a man born to business. Tall, clean, immaculate white skin caught the lantern light just enough to draw the eye, but not enough to alarm it. He smiled soft and warm, as though he were greeting an old friend. "Evening," he said, voice like aged bourbon. "A bit late, I know, but I was hoping for company. That girl, Jennifer, was it? Think she's still awake, barkeep?" The barkeep looked him over and hesitated. Something in him tugged sideways, but Jubilee's smile deepened just enough. "Paid double last time. I can again," he added, setting 2 silver coins on the counter. That did it. The barkeep gave a small nod. "Upstairs, last door on the left." Jennifer stirred at the sound of the latch turning. She sat up quickly, blanket falling off of one shoulder.
Elijah?
She murmured, voice hoarse from sleep. The figure in the doorway stepped in, and something twisted in her gut. It wasn't him. Too tall, too smooth, too still.
Who the hell?
She started, reaching for the knife she kept beneath the pillow. But he raised a hand, not fast, but gently, slowly, as though to calm a horse. "Shh." Jubilee said, and the sound of it scraped across her spine like sugar over rust. The room bent. The shadows deepened. Her legs stopped moving before her mind could tell them to. Her breath caught not from fear, but something more ancient. Primal. Unknowing. She reached again, slower this time, but it was too late. His smile vanished, and in its place came something vast and cold and utterly without mercy. He crossed the room in one step. Jennifer's scream never made it past his palm. When Elijah returned to the Gilded Mare, something was wrong. Not visibly, not loudly, but wrong. The lights felt dimmer, the walls tighter, the bar too empty. He moved through the saloon like a man following a scent only he could smell. Up the stairs, down the narrow hall, third door from the rear. He knocked once, out of prayer. No answer. He opened it. The room was dark, shades still rumbled, window cracked to shame. The kind of half-lit dim that said someone had been there after the room. He stopped and breathed. The stench wasn't strong, not to most noses, but Elijah's had known it before, far too many times. Burnt oak smell, sulfur at the edge of sweetness, the faint static hum of air not quite right. A portal had opened here, not some flashy spell or fairground illusion. Real magic, infernal, violent, and exact. It always left the same calling card. Elijah stepped further in, knees bent slightly. Hand and nerves were not drawn just yet. There'd be no fight here. The fight was already past. He touched the bed, still warm. There, on the floor near the footpost, a smear of soot shaped like fingers dragged briefly across the wood. No signs of struggle, no blood, just absence. He stood there for a long time, unmoving, listening to something only he could hear. Then, slowly, deliberately, he sat on the edge of the bed, took off his hat, and laid it beside him. The ring of flame pulsed once in his hand, hot and silent. He whispered to it, voice gravel rough. Who took her? There gave no answer, not in words, but the warmth shifted. Directional, insistent, like a dog pulling at a lead. He closed his eyes, saw a red cloth, heard music long and slow. The carnival. Elijah stood, tightened the strap on his coat, slid St. Breaker into the holster with a sound like stone meeting steel. There would be blood, and it would not be his. The air bit cold. Elijah moved through the outskirts of town, with a shadow cast before judgment. The carnival still stood, but it wasn't the thing he'd seen before. It wore the same face, red and white tents, garish banners, rust-choked rides. But everything about it felt wrong. The colors had bled. The angles bent just slightly too far. Well, now loomed like waiting mouths. And the lights. They pulsing like a too fast, then too slow. Every now and then, one would blink out entirely. He stepped onto the main thoroughfare. No calliope, no laughter, just the wind brushing canvas and the pressure. The air hung thick, every breath a burden, not to mention his cracked ribs. The ring of flame on his fingers seared hotter with each step. Not unbearably close. A warning. A lock being tested. Elijah kept walking. No crowds now, no fingers. Only empty bones of pleasure, hollowed out by something far over. He passed the game, stuck in the glass, shadows, too alert. A few had mouths and moved, almost imperceptibly. The Ferris wheel turned once on its own, then stopped. Elijah didn't blink. He reached the central tent, the one that had never been opened before. Its entrance stood wide now, black beyond the red stripes. The canvas ripped, there was no wind. Then came a voice. It didn't enter through his ears. It slid through the cracks in his soul. Cold. Oh, Elijah, come far. Elijah's jaw tightened. His hand hovered near St. Briggs, but did not draw. He didn't speak. Just stood there, listening as the voice crawled through him like smoke through lungs. It chuckled low and distant. Silence. And then the carnival lit up again. Not in yellow, not in white, but blood red. Every bulb along, every wire surged with a hellish glow. Shadows danced too fast beneath the light. The tents pulsed like organs. The ring of flame burned white hot, and Elijah didn't flinch. He stepped toward the open mouth of the tent, ready. But the tent wasn't there before. At the far edge of the carnival, past the warped Ferris wheel and the hollow carousel, stood a striped monstrosity Elijah hadn't seen before. Crispy and bony white. The canvas seemed as if it without wind. It breathed almost, a slow rhythmic pulse. The flap hung low, just enough to stay behind it. The air reeked, sulfur and old air. The static burned upon him. Elijah didn't hesitate. He crossed the distance and stepped through it. The noise of the carnival vanished behind him like a door slammed shut. And silence. One light overhead. A single unnatural spotlight illuminated a trapdoor in the center of the black floor. No signs, no carvings, just old warped wood slick at the edges. Then came the voice. Not behind him, not ahead, but inside. If you want her, man of God, come get her. No threat, no threat, just a cool, cold promise. Elijah stepped forward, opened the trapdoor, and a rush of heat rolled up to meet him. Beneath, the stone steps spiraling downward. They gleamed red to him, slick with moisture, soot, and something thicker. Blood. He decided. The door closed above him with a loud thump. The stairs narrowed wherever he went. The air grew thick and warm. Breathing became rare. He kept one hand near Saintbreaker, the other gripped the psalm blade tight. The walls were pulsing. Not quite stone, but more like steel, veined and shivered. Elijah kept going, and he didn't look back. At the bottom of the stairs, open space. The cavern yawned wide, bigger than it should have been. A twisted amphitheater carved from living rock. Jagged stalactites dripped rust-colored ichor. Tattered banners hung like flayed skin, stitched with glyphs too ancient to name. The arena floor was packed with dirt soaked with dry blood. Cracked bones lie on the edges and patterns too deep to be named. Elijah stepped above. A low chuckle echoed from the dark. Jubilee's voice everywhere and nowhere. I made them myself. From the best I ever took. Elijah didn't respond. He just loosened the blade and waited. The ground began to tremble. It came fast, crawling on all fours, its limbs bent wrong, skin too tight like it had been shrunk onto the bones. No eyes, no mouth, just a raw hole where its face should be, and all across its back, carnival tickets jammed in like scales. It screamed. No sound, not at first, just pressure like a nail through the temple. Then the noise hit. A shriek so sharp, Elijah staggered backwards, small blood spilling from his ears. He didn't wait any longer. He lunged low, drove the saw blade into his throat with a hard upward motion. The creature jerked and spasmed and collapsed. Black ichor soaked the floor. He rolled his neck, wiped the blade. Blood ran from his nose. Elijah didn't have time for two beams dropped from the ceiling like meat falling from a hook. Identical. Rat and Gary. They moved in perfect sync, limbs cracking at wrong angles, laughing in reverse. Elijah reached for the chain of gold. He let them flank him, then spun, loosening the chain in a wide arc. It struck the It sizzled, revealing the seams, the binding spot where they'd been stitched together bone to bone. He drew the saw blade. It hit true, lodging deep in the joints between them. The twins howled in tandem, sharp, screeching, disharmony. He fired one from Sandbreaker point blank. The twins came apart like rotten fruit. Moments later, he heard a sound not far off. A low guttural growl. It would appear Elijah would be given no respite. The thing stepped from the far tunnel, dragging one foot punched in mass. This one had once been a bear. Now, it was something else. Flesh distended, warped by too many prizes. A carousel horse encasing its ribcage. Glass bottles embedded in its spine. Teddy bears fused to its arms, their mouths open and torn silent screams. Its breaking pieces together. One for praise be. Fired. The bullet dug deep into the creature's chest, but it didn't stop. It charged. Elijah hit the ground hard, ribs screaming, blood in his mouth. He rolled, came up with the saw blade, but it caught him with the backhand that flung him 10 feet. He slammed into a pillar, and the world tilted. The ring on his hand flared. His breath hitched. One bullet left in the chamber. The creature stumbled forward, still speaking. God said I could. Please. Elijah fired. The round tore through the jaw of the carousel horse into whatever was left of the thing's heart. It stopped, then dropped. Elijah stayed down for a moment, breathing hard. Blood soaked his shirt. His coat was in tatters. But he got up. Because he had to. He moved to the far tunnel ceiling, one hand pressed. Made from melted crucifixes, their waxy glow casting long, bending shadows. Each one seemed to weep something dark. Elijah limped forward. The silence was worse than the screams. At the far end, a stair. This one rose, and at the top, music. Off-key, sour, like a lullaby being strangled. He climbed one step at a time, every limb burning, the ring a cold coal now. At the top, the light flared red through the seams of the tent flap. Jubilee was waiting. Elijah didn't draw. Not yet. He stepped forward and parted the flap with his fingers. What lay beyond wasn't a tent. It was a cathedral of rot and theater stitched from bloodied velvet and illusion. The ceiling soared too high, lost in shadow and curling incense smoke. The walls breathed, pulsing in slow rhythm, like a throat preparing to sing or scream. Candles burned cold on wrought iron sconces. The color of flame was wrong, not yellow, not red. A flickering that seemed to invert light instead of cast it. Elijah took this moment to reload Saintbreaker. The floor was a stage, wide and polished. Behind it, set against a lattice of dark red dripping wood, Jennifer hung in chains, upright, her wrists stretched above her head, ankles bound in place. Her hair clung to her brow and sweat on her sides. Her chest rose shallow and small, alive and still. Elijah didn't speak. He just left inside. And Jubilee, standing before the altar like a host before communion. As the moss came out of straight and smiled. All of him, all of his charm and strength, had melted away the glass. While he stood in his true, not monstrous realities, but in the kind that refused definition. He wore form like clothing, but shivered unfinished. Tall, shoulders too broad. His eyes were empty but endless, sockets aglow with coals that didn't cast heat. His suit had become a ceremonial robe made of stitched skin and choir linen, stained with rusty red script that rearranged itself as Elijah watched. The only thing unchanged was the bone-white cane he still held, and even that now throbbed with cold power, like it had once been a scepter or a spine. He smiled, not the kind of welcome, the kind that knew your name before you were born. I was beginning to wonder if you'd falter, Jubilee said, voice low and smooth, every word placed with the precision of a needle through silk. I had wagers on whether you'd make it. She had more faith in you than I did. He glanced back at Jennifer, almost wistful. Elijah walked forward. Each boot step echoed too low. Let it down. Jubilee turned back and cocked his head. So few men are honest with their pain. You don't hide it. I admire it. Elijah's jaw tightened. Let her down. Jubilee smiled theatrically. You still think this is about her? Elijah, you were always the first act. She's just the curtain. The everything inside, the altar, the chains, even the torches, appeared as stage props. Flat, painted wooden slopes. Then the illusion snapped back, more vivid than before. Elijah stopped 5 paces from the stage. His coat was torn, blood crusted along his ribs, his left hand trembling. But his eyes didn't waver. He looked at Jubilee. And something clicked. The ring on his finger began to glow, not in pain, but with something else. Recognition. He spoke quiet and low. You ain't a demon. Jubilee didn't answer. Elijah stepped closer. Yet not as careful. Another pace. You're a seraphim. The smile faltered, just like that. Elijah's voice didn't rise. He didn't curse, he just asked, how? Jubilee stared for a moment. Then, as if struck by real emotion, he laughed, deep, real, and ancient. You asked. Why? He descended the steps of the altar slowly, dragging the cane beside him like a tail. Oh, they never tell you what it costs, do they? That obedience ain't a virtue, it's a currency. One day wake up, Elijah, and realize you paid in full. And the shadow moved across and do you know what silence sounds like? Elijah. He leaned closer than he should have. It sounds like a dance. You came down, built your tent, and learned to feed. I built a cathedral where people could forget. That's all they want. Forgetting a little bit of joy, a chance to stop beating inside. The girl who screams in her sleep. It's not competition, it's a nurse. You're taking their souls. It's a trade, and they line up. I stood closer. The silence hung like ice. Do you know what you are? You're the final error in his plan. The itch and the tooth. The last man still chasing a god who's walked off stage. Elijah unholstered his tape record with one slow, steady motion. He didn't raise it, not yet. You fell. That's your choice. Don't mistake it for wisdom. And don't mistake your pain for righteousness. Jubilee shot back. It stung Elijah more than he would like to admit. The silence stretched. Elijah looked at Jennifer. Her fingers twitched. A breath caught in her chest. He saw the bruise on her cheekbone, the dry blood in her mouth, the chain burns at her wrist. You're done talking. He raised the revolver. Fire. The crack of the gun punched the air, raw and final. The shot struck Jubilee's center mass, right where a heart would be if he had one. Light erupted from the wound. Not a gold, not white, but something in between. A light that didn't belong on Earth. Jubilee staggered back a half step. Just a half. Then he looked down at the hole in his chest. Looked up and grinned. You think that hurts me? You still think this is a duel, son? Something chill. He opened his arms, and his body came undone. The suit melted away. The skin shimmered and dropped like candy. Wings burst from his back. And with the feathers, banners of ruined scripture, some still smoldering at the edges. His body was hollow, like a living wound, with too many eyes blinking shut along his ribs. His face was split down the middle by a second mouth, whispering something in reverse Latin. The blade he held reformed in his hand. A weapon now. Part cane, part crescent scythe. Humming with a note too low to hear, but Elijah could feel it in his teeth. Jubilee stepped forward. Oh, bleeding already. I can smell it. Not just your body, Elijah, but your hand. Elijah holstered Saintbreaker, drew the psalm blade with one smooth motion. Jubilee came first. The blade hit like a guillotine. Elijah caught it on the flat of his sword and dropped low. The tent pulled. They fought. Steel against something that only looked like it. Elijah struck low. Jubilee blocked. He spun, wings whipping like razors. One tore across Elijah's shoulder, splitting coat and skin alike. Blood-soaked fabric. Elijah grabbed the beating fall. You thought if you were good enough, you'd stop losing people. Elijah didn't answer. He moved in fast, drove the psalm blade towards Jubilee's flank, missed by inches. Your father prayed every night, Elijah. Where was your God when ghouls came through the town? When they killed Mommy and Daddy and your brothers? Elijah ducked a winged blade and cut along Jubilee's thigh. Sparks flew and light leaped. You think I lied, but I saw it. I was actually there. He struck Elijah across the chest, full force. The sound was like a bell tolling. Elijah crashed back into the tent pole. His lungs empty. He spat blood and came up again. Jubilee laughed. Elijah Mandrake, the last holy killer. You think of yourself as God's weapon. Tell me, do you think they'd be proud of you? All those corpses you've left in your wake, all those graves marked and unmarked, the ones you killed and the ones you couldn't see. Elijah lunged. The scream. He met Jubilee in the center of the arena. They're blocked. Don't you know? Elijah roared, headbutted. The impact sent both stumbling. Blood ran down Elijah's forehead. His ribs ached. Jubilee growled, more animal now than angel. You never learned the lesson. God doesn't save. He watches. Then he charged. Elijah barely had time to brace. Jubilee slammed into him with the weight of something twice his size and none of the humanity. They went down hard, skidding across the broken floor, past ruined candles and torn banners. Jubilee's claws dug for Elijah's throat, but Elijah twisted, seeing his own. Both scrambled to their feet. Jubilee moved first. He looked up, wings folding, then snapped open again in midair and scrambled. He came down with his scythe blade arcing for Elijah's head. Elijah rolled, barely missing the edge, and brought the psalm blade up in a brutal strike. The blade connected the Jubilee's wing. There was a screech of tearing flesh and scripture as one of the burnt feathers was severed at the roots. Black light bled from the wound. Jubilee roared. You're just a butcher with a Bible. He spat, turning his spin into a kick that caught Elijah in the side. The impact launched him across the tent, crashing into a support beam that splintered with the force. Elijah coughed, tasted copper, and forced himself back to his feet. His left side screamed with every breath, but he didn't break the stance. You still believe? Jubilee said in mincing, dragging his weapon behind him in a lazy arc that carved glowing gashes into the dirt. somewhere in that thick skull, you still think there's meaning in this. In you. He struck again. Elijah blocked. Steel rang against whatever hell-forged power Jubilee's blade was made of. Sparks flew. They exchanged a flurry of blows, quick, vicious, and ugly. A hook from Elijah broke one of Jubilee's many teeth. A counter-swipe tore a gash down Elijah's back. Neither gave ground. Elijah caught a moment, ducked beneath a wide swing, and buried his shoulder into Jubilee's gut, lifting him off his feet. He drove the angelic monster backward at one of the cracked altar stones. It shattered. It collapsed to the wreckage. Jubilee was first to recover. His wings twisted inward and slammed into Elijah like fists, battering him down. He grabbed Elijah by the throat and began to squeeze, fingers burning with celestial heat. You die, yeah? You die knowing nothing you did mattered, just like your father. Elijah's vision narrowed. The heat was blistering, but his hand slid behind his back toward the chain. Jubilee's grip tightened. Elijah's fingers found steel. He surged forward and bit down hard on Jubilee's cheek. The seraphim screamed, loosed his grip for half a second, and that was enough. Elijah tore free, blood slicking his jaw, and slammed the pommel of the psalm blade into Jubilee's temple. The seraph staggered. Elijah kicked him square in the chest, knocking him flat. They were both a mess now, bloodied, staggering, and panting, but Elijah was still standing. Jubilee rose slowly, laughing through broken teeth. Yay, Elijah, you just stuck me. Close enough. Elijah dropped to her feet, blood in his mouth, pain everywhere, his vision swam. But his hand found something else. The chain still. The chain of Golgotha. He gripped it and waited. Jubilee raised his weapon to the clear. The chain wrapped around Jubilee's finger. The seraph screamed. The air rose with holy fire as the chain burned its way into the skin. Climbing into the wind, stripped Elijah Bennett and seared in smoke. Elijah dragged himself up, teeth clenched, Saint Breaker in one hand, chain in the other. The seraph flamed, wings shattering the tent supports. The canvas began to fall inward like a collapsing lung. You think this redeems, yeah? Jubilee hissed. His eyes were blazing now, pure white fire and loss. This doesn't make you a savior, just another weapon no one asked for. I don't need to be a savior. He drew the chain. He drew the psalm blade. Jubilee tried to Jennifer stood on the wall, barely she called him long enough to see the Then he stepped back toward the seraphim. Jubilee coughed. He spared you like love. He spared you to watch. You're not a chosen son. You're a test case. Elijah stood above him. The psalm blade gleamed with divine light choked in blood. Jubilee's wings spasmed. You don't even know if there's anything waiting at the end. You don't know if the light ever comes. Elijah knelt, pressed a hand to Jubilee's chest. Then I'll walk into the dark anyway. And Elijah drove the blade in, deep, through bone and through spirit. As it sank, Elijah whispered the words, "Oh, how you are fallen from heaven, O day star son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground. You who laid the nations low. Jubilee arched and screamed, a sound that didn't belong in this world. Not in any world. It was like heaven itself exhaling a name it had tried to forget. Light burst from his mouth, his eyes, the hollow beneath his ribs. The wings cracked. The flames turned inward. The markings on the chain pulsed once, twice, and then Jubilee died screaming. The body burned from the inside out, then imploded in silence. The light went out all at once. Jubilee's scream still echoed in the marrow of Elijah's bones, but there was no time to dwell in the silence it left behind. The cathedral of ruin that had masqueraded as a tent began to come apart the moment the seraph died, not torn by fire or wind, but folding inward. The seams in the red velvet walls came undone. One moment there was a ceiling overhead, the next there was only sky. And beneath that unraveling sky, Jennifer hung limp in her chains. Elijah staggered to her, knees weak, lungs raw. His coat was a ragged thing now, the color of old blood, and one eye swelled half shut. But his hands were steady as he unclasped the iron from her wrist. She stirred again, breath was sharp. Her body leaned into his, and she murmured something against his chest he couldn't quite catch. That was enough. She was alive. The air was thick with the smell of burnt copper and holy gas, like an altar too long neglected, reunited in one terrible blaze. Elijah didn't look back. He lifted her into his arms. His legs groaned in protest, but he carried her all the same. Behind him, the rest of the carnival collapsed without sound. One last breath, then nothing. By the time they crossed the charred threshold, there was no sign it had ever stood. Just a scorched ring of grass in the earth, the lingering taste of something ancient, evil, undone at last. They walked. Back toward town, back toward the Gilded Manor. Elijah limped. Every step a sermon of pain. Jennifer leaned into him as her strength returned by slow degrees, one breath at a time. Their shadows stretched ahead of them in the faintest glow of the coming dawn. The ring on Elijah's finger had cooled. The metal felt inert, weightless for the first time in months, like it had finally said all it needed to say. Jennifer broke the silence with a whisper.
Is it over?
Elijah didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the road. His breath was a rasp. Yeah, it's over. The words came low, hoarse, but honest. Elijah wondered if he would be given more than just a moment's rest this time. They walked in silence for a while. Jennifer's fingers moved slightly on his. The town was different. Not in any obvious way, just quiet. A little girl stepped out from behind a barrel as they passed. Her nightgown was wrinkled, her eyes heavy. In her arms, she held a toy rabbit. She looked up at Elijah and Jennifer, blinked slowly, then looked down at her carnival prize. She dropped it. It hit the ground with a thud that sounded hollow. The girl rubbed her eyes and wandered back inside the room. Elijah looked down at her. The ring did not burn. The toy just lay there waiting. The weight of exhaustion hit him all at once. In his bones, in his soul. The benefits stayed on his neck, squeezed. They walked on. They reached the Gilded Manor just as the sky began to shine. That cold, gray light before the light broke through sunrise. The kind of morning meant for aftermath. The inn stood quiet in the hush of it. Strictly flame. No softening, no perfume in the halls. No flicker of candlelight pretending warmth. Just wood, worn floors, and silence. Real silence. Elijah opened the door to his room and stepped inside. Jennifer followed without needing to be asked. She helped him out of what was left of his coat. The fabric was stiff with blood and soot. She folded it once and laid it over the back of her chair. Fingers tracing the burn marks along the collar. Then she turned and looked him over. Really looked. His tunic was half split. The front dark with dry blood. The seams torn from shoulder to waist. He didn't say a word. Just stood there, eyes empty, chest rising slow. She didn't ask if he was Instead, she went to the stove and began feeding kindling into the burner beneath the copper wash basin. The metal hissed. Water began to warm. When she returned, she helped him straight with nothing. Her fingers were careful in practice. She pulled the cloth away from raw wounds, bruised ribs, and flesh scored by stones, claws, and heat. He didn't flinch, but he didn't meet her eyes either.
Bath first,
She said quietly.
before anything closes her.
He gave a nod. She brought the basin over, now steaming, and stepped in without hesitation. Arms racing the edge. Face half shadowed in the rising steam. Jennifer knelt beside him with a cloth, dipped it, wiped gently along his shoulders, where the skin was blistered in patches from fire and magic both. She said nothing. Let the steam do the talking. After a long moment, Elijah broke the silence. I was 5 when God put a gun in my hand. Jennifer kept cleaning. She didn't look at him, but he knew she was listening. Couldn't read. Didn't know my own last name. But I could shoot a melon clean off the fence post from 20 feet by the end of that week. John said it had to be. Said there was a time for childhood. Then he took the cloth again, and drew it gently across the floor. Shooting drills. How to spot a possession by the way he holds his jaw. There is something even when you may not. He paused, steam poured up under him. His eyes stayed open. Break enough bones, they stop healing straight. That's why my shoulder sticks. Broke it on a blended rockhound when I was 14. John had me throw knives on my left hand for a month. Said the time. Jennifer's hand slowed just right. But not anymore. He was tearing me. I fought things. I couldn't imagine that John himself couldn't imagine these things. I mean, a fucking seraphim. Jennifer rinsed the cloth, wringed it out, her voice soft.
For what?
Elijah looked at his hand, the ring on his finger. To carry this. She stopped moving, looked down at the ring. The metal, once molten with holy fire, now sat cold and still, its glow dawn blunt.
So the ring...
It ain't for love. Not that kind. He flexed his hand once, the joint stiff. When a man of the order lives long enough, and most don't, God offers him release. Not from service, but from solitude.
What does that mean?
It means, if he's chosen, he's given a child. Not by blood, by fire. A successor. Someone to carry the burden. She was quiet. John was chosen. He didn't ask for it, didn't want it. But when the time came, when I was ready, the ring burned clean through his hand. Jennifer blinked. Burned the finger right off, bone and all. That's the sign. The ring has to take something. You don't pass it. It takes itself.
What happened to the finger?
Burned and salted at that same day. The closest thing I have to a father is living the rest of his years with the others of our order high in the mountains. Jennifer didn't speak. The boy becomes the weapon. The man becomes the memory. The water was starting to cool. She helped him out of the basin and dried him carefully. The wounds were cleaner now, the blood thinned to pink. He sat on the edge of the bed while she stitched the worst of them. His side, his shoulder. Cracked ribs, the gash just above his knee, his eyes swollen shut. Her hands were steady. She didn't flinch and neither did he. When it was done, she helped him into clean linen, then pulled the covers back and eased him into the bed. Then, she lay beside him. The ceiling above them was wooden slats and cracked plaster. The kind of ceiling you never noticed until everything else was quiet. She stared at it. The ring was cold on his finger. Silent. And for the first time in a long time, Elijah Mandrake silently hoped it would stay that way. He didn't say it aloud, but Jennifer did. She closed her eyes, and so did he. Hey everybody, Kevin from Nightmares Nightly here. If you made it this far, I want to thank you for listening. I love bringing these stories to life, and I've recently been writing a lot of my own. If you'd like to support the channel and what I do, and hear more of my own stories, please consider becoming a member, where I try to upload exclusive, ad-free stories every week. And as always, thanks for listening, everybody. They never ask for what they really want. Oh, they think they do. They come to me with trembling voices, with eyes heavy from staring too long into a life that didn't deliver what they thought it would. They come broken or bored or burning with hunger they can't name, and they make their wish. Always so certain, always so desperate. But the truth is, what they ask for is never the thing itself. It's the echo of a feeling they once had, or a fantasy of something they think will fix the emptiness they're too proud to name. They say things like, I want to be remembered, when what they mean is, I want to matter. They say, I want love, when what they really mean is I want to be needed. They say I want truth when they mean I want to win. And sometimes, like with the case of Mark Rowley, they say something truly foolish. I just want to know what would have happened if I chose that particular kind of curiosity. Nostalgic, romantic, amazing, is one of my favorites. And there's a specific flavor to it, like old smoke clinging to a coat never worn again. Like the letter never sent, still hidden in the drawer, aging quietly with the paper it haunts. Regret is one of humanity's most loyal companions. It never ages. It never grows dull. It only changes shape. I've seen civilizations from steel to steel. And in every era, people have been haunted by roads they didn't take. Big girl, the mother who walked away, the prophet who bit his tongue, the boy who never said as if the past owes them something. As if they could reach into it and pull out the version of themselves that didn't fail, didn't compromise, didn't choose what they chose. But they can't. And that's where I come. I dwell in the space between decisions, in the thin, trembling place just before yes becomes no. My realm is not fire nor ice. It isn't punishment. It isn't salvation. It is a waiting room with no clock. A place of intent made form. Made long. You call it shadow. I call it home. And when you see, when your longing becomes heavier than I arrive. Not with fanfare, not with thunder. Just a voice, a presence, and a contract as old as will itself. I don't twist it. That's the great lie. I fulfill it. Precisely. Perfectly. Mark Rowley asked to know what would happen if he hadn't chosen to. If he followed the moon. If he hadn't become a husband and father, but had instead become what he